Pro tip number 3, know your limits. This is actually a really important one, and one that I know I struggle with. I've struggled with this kind of thing most of my life because I like to think I can take on the world, do it all. And you know what? You can't. You can't do it all. And so you need to be really honest with yourself about what are the things that you are capable of doing and what are the things you're not capable of doing. And there is no shame in that. There's actually a greater shame in trying to do things that you really just are not capable of doing. It is far better to say, I can't do this, I need some help, or I need someone else to take over here, than to try to keep doing it if that's really not the case. I'll give you a few examples. So I had one placement with me, I'll call him B. B was a really, really sweet kid, and I really, really wanted to be able to keep him and to do everything I could for him, but he also had a lot of special needs. He needed a lot of extra attention. He could not be left alone for long periods of time, so I couldn't just like go to work for the day and leave him at home or anything. Some of his needs were such that he wasn't enrolled in a regular school, and so we were having trouble figuring out what kind of educational system to get him in, and so that became a bit of a juggling act to figure out, and I tried with him for 13 days, but I finally realized I just could not do it. By myself especially, I did not have the resources to pull that off. I had to finally accept that as much as I wanted to help him, as much as I wanted to keep him here, and as much as I really liked him, I just could not do for him the things that he needed, and it was unfair to him and to me to try to keep doing that. And so I had to say, you're going to have to find some other place to take him that can actually meet the needs that he has. Knowing what you're willing to handle in terms of children placed in your home, and what their background or needs might be, and even how many. I recently had a emergency placement come in who was my 3rd placement, so I already had 2 in the home, and he would be number 3. And DCS worked out a special arrangement where he was able to sleep on the couch, and that was okay for this short period. And I went, well, okay, if you say so. But I realized very quickly that was not okay for me. And so when he left, I kind of breathed a sigh of relief and said, okay, and that's the last time we do that. From now on, 2 is my limit. And I have 2 children with me right now, and so if I get a call again saying, hey, short-term emergency placement, can you take a 3rd on the couch? I'm sorry, no, I really can't. It's just too much to juggle. It's just me, and I need to focus on the kids that I have. I need to be able to give them my all, and I can't do that if I'm taking in more and more and more. So sometimes saying no is the healthy thing to do. Another example actually comes from a very simple parenting issue of just knowing what you will find acceptable and unacceptable in your house and figuring out what kinds of rules to set. I think perhaps one of the differences for foster parents compared to birth parents is birth parents, they start out with the babies and it's pretty simple. The kid's just kind of there, sleeping and eating and crying and pooping, and that's kind of it, right? And then as they grow up, you figure out what works as they grow up. With foster parenting, especially with teenagers, they come in as more or less fully formed people, and they have ideas and opinions and interests and stuff like that. And having to figure out the rules of the household on certain things has been a really interesting adventure. So, for example, R really wanted a PlayStation, and he had a PlayStation at his dad's place, and we were able to figure out getting it from his dad and setting it up in the house, and I was okay with that. I was like, that's fine. But of course, at the same time, I didn't want him just playing PlayStation all the time. That did not seem like a good idea. And so figuring out what are going to be the rules of the PlayStation and how often can you play and under what circumstances. The rule at this point is for every hour you read, you can have an hour on the PlayStation. And he pushes back a bit at times. He tries to get a little more time, and so it's just about learning what are the boundaries I'm going to set, and being gentle but firm about setting those boundaries. Or a related piece, initially he was asking if he could have it in the bedroom, and I said, no, you cannot have that in the bedroom. That has to be out in the living room in a common area, and just holding my ground on that one. I had another child who he had a habit of not finishing his meals, and he would still have a fair amount left on the plate or in the bowl, and he would say, okay, I'm done, and I would look at it and say, there's still plenty of food there, and he would say, no, it's gone, there's nothing left, I'm done. And getting him to understand that it was okay if you didn't want to eat it now, but you couldn't just throw food away. So we would wrap it up and save it for later. And then when he was hungry again later, I would say, well, you have this thing left, we can reheat it, and you can have that. And recognizing that for me, it was very important not to waste food, and trying to teach that that value to the children with me, and getting them to understand that there are just certain things that we don't do. We don't want to be wasteful. That's something we want to avoid. On the flip side of that, there are certain behaviors that I am not particularly a fan of, but I also recognize that I might not get those behaviors to stop entirely, especially if it's something that a child's been doing for several years. And so finding ways to kind of negotiate that and say, all right, if you're going to do this thing, you can only do it in these circumstances. As a way to say, all right, I'm going to pick my battles, right? I'm not going to force everything upon you the way I would want it done. But there are also certain things that I'm not going to allow in my household. Sometimes it is a little bit of a negotiation. Yeah, you're the parent, yeah, you're the final line, but if you really want to be a dictatorial, authoritarian parent, then you're probably going to have a lot more battles, and it might not be as pleasant. And so knowing your limits is also knowing what battles you really want to pick, and what are the ones that are worth fighting, what hill are you really willing to die on, and which ones are you willing to say, all right, let's find a different way to think through this, and find a compromise that works for everyone. Because especially as teenagers, the kids I've had are 16 and 17. I mean, they're burgeoning adults, right? And soon enough they will be legal adults. And so to some degree, part of my task is also doing what I can in the time they're with me to help prepare them for adulthood, to help them figure out, how do I navigate this world and make these decisions for myself in a healthy and responsible way. And I may not have a big window, I may not be able to help them figure everything out, but for the time I have, what can I help them figure out? Sometimes saying no is the healthy thing to do. There's a real life lesson in there on a lot of levels, isn't there?